Good morning and welcome to the United Church of Moscow on Easter morning. I'm Jodie Tooley and I'm here to bring the Easter morning reflection for the United Church of Moscow. This morning we have already heard the Easter story written by John. And did you know that American author John Updike also published an Easter story? It's called Short Easter. Mr. Updike published it in the 1990s, so it's a later piece in his life and writing. Short Easter is about a 62-year-old curmudgeon named Fogel, whose retirement is drawing near, and who is more and more unhappy with his life, and literally with all the terrible ways of the world. Fogel finds everything. He finds everything to be pointless. When Easter has an hour clipped away from it, because for the first time Fogel can remember, daylight savings spring ahead moment falls on Easter Sunday. Like those sleepy disciples with Jesus in Gethsemane, for Fogel, even Easter won't stay awake a whole day. Well, in one of the blogs I have been looking through of late, I noticed that one blog writer carried forward in her mind, in that way we do, that John Updike's story is called Small Easter, not Short Easter. Small Easter. Small Easter. Are we having a small Easter this year? And I feel like we're not supposed to have a small Easter, ever, because Easter is big. Theologically speaking, today is the biggest day of our Christian year. We gather for a happy and delectable potluck brunch, and flowers bloom everywhere, and more people come to church just for this morning. Easter is big, right? Easter is big. Except when it's not. Except when it's small. A small Easter. On Friday, our executive minister, Doug Avilés Bernal, he sent all of us Evergreen Region pastors a Good Friday email. Doug's been great. Doug's been amazing, working around the clock to help us Evergreen pastors clear some pathways forward during this coronavirus crisis time. He sent us an email on Friday which said, I am thinking of you on the eve of this very big Good Friday. Tomorrow, there will be hundreds of thousands of people who will wake up to a Friday utterly empty of someone they love. Friday was a really big Good Friday. Family and friends are bewildered, not knowing what to do or where to turn. They couldn't even gather in a hospital room. There were tears. There were many words of love, a lot of balled up Kleenex. The promise of death hangs heavy in the air these days. It was a big Good Friday, bigger than any of us would have liked. If we are honest, what we prefer is a small Good Friday, a snippet of time maybe, for remembering the suffering and death of Jesus. I even sort of relish gloomy weather on Good Friday. I don't want to ignore it, Good Friday, and I don't. But isn't it better that Good Friday is small? A small Good Friday and a big Easter. Now that's what we want. That's what most of us get in church. That's the way we plan it. That's the way we orchestrate it. But life doesn't mirror the emphases of church, at least not this year, and at least not for me, at least not for wives and husbands and kids and parents and grandparents and close dear friends of 99,180 lovely human beings dead now because a virus leapt up. and at least not for many others, at least not for some of us here, those who are missing Missy Manning, or those who are missing John Mitoff, or those who are missing Bobby Fortunato, or any of us. For all our lives are empty of someone we love. For many people, for many reasons, Good Friday still looms large, even as we sing, Christ the Lord is risen today. It was a big Good Friday, and today is a small Easter, which seems wrong, but it is what it is. And in hearing this morning's story again, the version of it John wrote and Karen read for us, I get it brand new, that many, many people have had small Easters. Even that first miraculous, world-changing Sunday morning was a small Easter. Mary's Easter began just an agonizing extension of Good Friday. At 4 a.m., Mary kept the burial tradition of her day. She carries an oil lamp along the paths of the garden. She persists through thorny brambles and she climbs over rocks. She smells the fragrances and presses through more darkness. When she spots the broken seal on the tomb, her chest tightens. What's this? The stone has been moved. With tears streaming, Mary flings herself back into town to hammer on Peter's and John's doors. She wakes them and they all begin to run. John outruns Mary and Peter and he stands at the tomb looking in. When impulsive Peter wedges himself in, they guess that Jesus' body has been stolen, so they are stunned and frightened, I'm sure, to see his grave clothes there in a heap. Is that lump over there even grave clothes? We can hardly see it. What's going on here? Something pretty big is going on here. A lot has happened for a simple grave robber to do all this. John and Peter leave. What is there to do while it is still dark? They go home. They just go home. These aren't the actions of men who have grasped the meaning of things or can guess that something mind-blowing is happening while it is still dark. Anticlimactic in my book. So Peter and the other disciple, they are having a small Easter. Mary stays with her grief in the emptiness of the tomb. It is in her despair that the risen Christ comes to her, and it's his voice that she recognizes. Mary, he gently says. Then she speaks back, Rabboni. That's Aramaic, and it means more than rabbi, you see, more than teacher. We might say sensei in our times. It's a title reserved for an honored teacher, and it's the name that was hers for him. Their voices hold the love of deep friendship. He's more than a friend. Rabboni is a title that says, you have opened new worlds for me. You have opened me to new ways of life. Mary recognizes the voice of this gardener in the shadows, and they have a moment. Mary Magdalene has the big Easter. She has the big Easter, the kind of Easter we'd all love to have. And you know, there are others in the story we practically never talk about on Easter morning. Well, I guess they're not in the story, they are part of the story. You know, like Judas, whom Matthew suggests experiences death by suicide. Or the 9 other disciples. Or Jesus' mother, that's another Mary, and his aunt is Mary too. What's up with that? And there's Joseph of Arimathea who donates the tomb. And there are crowds of hopeful Jewish people who had listened to this Jesus and in listening wondered if they might catch a break from their impossibly grim lives, lived as foreigners occupiers. What about these characters in our story? Didn't they have a small Easter too? Nobody logged into Facebook to see Mary's update. Talk to the risen Lord this morning by his tomb. There was no Twitter. In that day, there wasn't even an old school phone tree. Many of the people who grieve so deeply on Friday don't ever hear the Sunday news. It would have been months before trickles of rumors hit them. It would have been that old game. As the news passes down the line, who knows what the message becomes? They say Jesus rose from the dead. I heard the disciples took his body. Well, I heard it was the guards. Even those who know something is going on don't really know what's going on. Mennonite pastor Craig Barnes says that Easter is about more hope than we can handle. The friends, the family, the followers of Jesus, they don't know what to make of this news on the first Easter morning. They have no frame of reference, no way to process the depths of wonder and hope imbued into the news they are beginning to hear. Eventually, the story comes. Some make some sense of it, and tellers tell it, and writers write it, and a raggedy community forms among those who are touched by it. Social boundaries are broken down. The fear of death is swallowed up in the knowledge of God's vast and all-consuming love for us. Eventually, but not that morning. That morning, it is a small Easter for most. Maybe not for Jesus, maybe not for Mary, but for most. Easter starts small because Good Friday is so big. Sometimes we have to wait a while before the insight we need appears. When we consider the unspeakable things we people do to one another, now Syria comes to my mind. That guy from John Updike's short story, Fogel, his name is, he isn't wrong, is he? The world is a mess. And like all of us, he's trying to wrap his head around that reality. When a shattered life grips us, when we are watching a sermon from our couches on Easter morning because a virus is ravaging New York City and the poor people of New Orleans, and every nation is affected, when we lose someone we cherish in some unexpected moment, well, it's Good Friday. That's big. So it seems like Easter should be big. One big whammo of a resurrection life, which does happen once in a while. But more often, and certainly for those who loved Jesus during his time on earth, Easter is dwarfed by the magnitude of Good Friday because Good Friday knocks us to our knees. And so we get up slowly. We rise up slowly, looking out through tears as Mary did, listening to that which is nearby as Mary did. Sometimes Easter has to start small. Even when we look about and see good news unfolding here and there, it can still feel like Easter is small. It takes a while for Easter to sink in, doesn't it? We get so busy. We get so distracted. We are so self-involved. We are coping in anxious times. We live in a time Easter is given over to chocolate and marshmallow and bunnies and eggs and money-making enterprises. It takes a while for Easter to sink in. It takes a while for that small Easter to sink deep, deep into the crevices, into the broken up soil of our hearts. It takes a while to see the resurrection promise begin to grow and bud and blossom. It takes a while for us, as it did for Jesus' first folks, to dry our tears and open our eyes to the truth that our resurrection promise is not about attaining success in one way or another. Our resurrection promise is not about seeing an end to all of the countless things we don't like about what's going on here on earth. And the Easter promise doesn't have anything to do with a return to a happier time when we were in better health, maybe, or when our kids were sweeter and easier to have around, or when someone we loved was still with us. Our resurrection promise isn't about any of those things. God's promise is not about having things the way we want them to be. When we think that way, we are creating our own small Easters. So hear this. Here's what the resurrection promise is about. The resurrection promise is about the deep reality of sacred life, even in the midst of crazy violence, viruses that take over the patterns of the world, hurtful politics hell-bent on injuring and exploiting the poor, and even death. And now I am reminded that we carry hope for our precious Linda, who lives at the threshold these days. The resurrection promise is about God's reckless love for us, God's unflinching love, I like to say, and our ability by God's grace to live into that powerful love in the direction of other people, in the direction of all creation, so that we might even heal up some of our suffering planet too. Did you hear in today's story that Jesus tells Mary, "Don't try to hold on to me"? If we are having a big Easter, we don't cling too insistently to the way we want things to be, but we hobble forward. We lean forward. We press on forward, living into the good news of renewal and restoration and reconciliation and possibility. We work side by side with God toward the fullness of life God intends for all of us, for the world over. Now here's a good story, fresh from the presses. Denise's new boss, Jana, has a dear friend, Julie, who is an RN and has given 90 days to FEMA. So now Julie is working at a nurse at Jacobi Hospital in the Bronx. A 90-day stint she has given. Julie is sharing her New York City coronavirus adventures with Jana every day, and every story tries to curl my straight hair. Julie reports that there are 2 other nurses in her Marriott who have come from far away to help. She also confirms that same dangerous thing we hear on the news. There is scant protection for the medical folks to wear, and especially, she says, hats. Those medical hats. Some are wearing shower caps, but they fall off and they are worthless. Well, Jana and Denise put their heads together and they have adopted those 3 nurses staying at the Marriott, Julie and the other 2 brave souls who got up and went. Denise gave a few good hours to it Maundy Thursday night, and by the end of the evening, she had her Beagle moms making cool-looking, well-fitting medical hats. And yes, the fabric is all about beagles. But the sewing patterns are flowing among the Beagle moms, and the moms are sewing, and the hats are wonderfully made, and that discouraging corner of Good Friday next week will turn into a pretty nice-sized Easter for Julie and her 2 compadres. There, a good-sized hit of Easter, thanks to Jana's concerned love for her friend and to Denise and the Beagle moms who are paying attention. And they say, "I'm in." Transformation happens in the dark when we are afraid and frightened. Way too often, Good Friday feels way too big, and Easter Sunday feels too small. So let us hear the truth of resurrection again. On a Sunday, we imagine that even Goldilocks might declare that there is still big hope in Easter. God lives. Jesus lives. Love lives here today among us all. New life is always rising in us. Love's spirit is always creating. Amen. Thanks for coming to hear our reflection today. Easter blessings to you all.